middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
Hey, right. Hey, come out. Right. Punch, right. Circle left. Circle left.
Just stand still, huh?
Get ready. 1 o'clock. Good. 12. 5 to 3. I got mixed up.
There is no way that you could have been as bad at hockey as you are at golf.
All right, let's go. You like that, old man? You want a piece of me?
I don't want a piece of you. I want the whole thing.
Pugilistic pageantry brings us to another episode of the Cinemaniacs. Hi, I'm Mark. I am the Cinemaniac. You, hopefully, are a Cinemaniac if you're watching this. Together, we are the titular Cinemaniacs. Hey, how are you doing? Had a busy weekend last weekend, which I will tell you. The flames. Straight out of hell comes the Cinemaniac. I have a couple flicks to talk to you about. Fewer than were actually released this week, but I think we can fill an hour of my yapping about them. First up, we have the sequel to a film that, interesting backstory on the film. So there's this film that came out was coming straight to video, called In the Deep, I believe it was called. And I got a copy of this thing called In the Deep, and then I watched it, and I thought it was really good. And then days before I was supposed to talk about it on this very show, I got an email from the PR company saying, hold off on that. So it was this movie called In the Deep, as I was saying. And I get this message saying, don't review it, it's getting a theatrical release. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, this movie is pretty good, it might do well. And it was retitled, or I think actually the original title was 47 Meters Down. And they retitled it In the Deep, maybe to play off In the Shallows, that was theatrical at the time. And 47 Meters Down came out into the theaters, did really well, and now we have a sequel a couple years later, called 47 Meters Down Uncaged, which is what I'm going to talk about. Told you that story to tell you this one. So I really liked 47 Meters Down. It was Mandy Moore and another woman trapped in a shark cage underwater, and they can't get up, and they only have one oxygen tank, and then sharks show up. Here we have a totally unrelated sequel. It's just more being hosed underwater. This time it's hosed underwater in a cave. We have a group of young ladies who bust off into the Mexican wilderness, tropical wilderness, beachside wilderness, whatever. They go where they're not supposed to be going. Don't tell anybody. They go to an archaeological dig of a Mayan temple that's underwater, and they basically get trapped in an underwater temple with giant blind sharks. And I thought it was pretty stupid, actually. I was actually somewhat looking forward to this. I like movies where people are just terminally hosed, and I thought that's what I was going to get with this movie, and it is, but it's just bad. Like from the opening, from when the logo first comes up and the font and the way it comes up and the music, I'm like, ooh, this is a little cheesy. And the characters are just kind of lame. The actresses are not that great. The dialogue is bad. And I could forgive all that if the peril was really well executed. And it's not. It's mega cheesy. They go underwater and they have the kind of diving masks that let you see their whole face that are well lit inside. And they have sort of intercoms between each other. So you hear all of the awful dialogue that they've dubbed in after the fact. And it's a whole lot of hard to see what's going on. It's a whole lot of bubbles. If anybody was paid by the bubble for this film, they now own their own island, because it was all I could see was bubbles the whole time. And I'm not talking about Michael Jackson's chimp. Let's not even get into that. And it's just, it's tight shots in caves and shaky cameras underwater and jump scares up the wazoo and bubbles. And I'm just like, what is going on? And I don't care about these people. And another jump scare. It was really lame. I mean, there's a little bit of, shocking violence here and there, but this was a very not R-rated movie. Like, you can clearly see lines that have been re-looped a couple times in the film to take just even a mild swear word and tone it down to a non-swear word. So it just seemed super cheesy for me. It seems like it's really aimed at like maybe junior high school kids or something like that, who may like it. But I was really not asking for much with 47 Meters Down Uncaged, and that's what I got. Not much. I didn't like it a bit. So I wouldn't really recommend this. I mean, maybe it's good if you want to go and laugh at a movie, because at moments this film was so bad, I wanted to start laughing. There are certain moments in slow motion and facial expressions and things like that that are just like, really? Like, this is a film where I watch it and I'm immediately like, can Riff Tracks do this next week? Because it's prime for that sort of thing. So you may get more out of it than I did, but I found 47 Meters Down to be very, shallow. So we have then the other film that I saw this weekend. This is interesting. This is one I went into totally blind. I poked myself in both eyes with a hot poker, and it was basically a radio drama for me. This is a film I had maybe seen a trailer for, didn't really know anything about. Circumstance and timing worked out. It was the only other thing I was able to see. We have Cate Blanchett as a former Wunderkind archaeologist. No, not archaeologist, architect. It's an A word. And she is miserable in her life. She is losing her marbles, amongst other things. She has a husband and a daughter, and the family is trying to keep everything together amidst her breakdown and wanderlust and wistfulness in a film entitled Where'd You Go, Bernadette? I didn't know going into this. I didn't know until the very end when the credits came up. This is a Richard Linklater film, the guy who gave us Boyhood and Dazed and Confused and many, many films. Sunshine, I think. Was it Sunshine? That was Danny Boyle. Many indie and art house and drama films over the years. School of Rock he did as well. So you have Blanchett, as I said, as this the titular Bernadette, who is somebody who was once a hotshot in the world of architecture in LA and sort of chucked it all for various reasons and is now living in this weird, decaying former institution in this sort of Tony neighborhood next door to Kristen Wiig, who is the supermom, super annoying supermom kind of person, and they sort of clash. Again, going in blind, I didn't know what to expect. I thought this was going to be a drama or even perhaps like a murder mystery. It turns out that it's sort of a comedy drama, as much comedy as there is drama, about this woman who's just at this point in her life where she's just starting to lose it because she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. She's not doing what she's supposed to be doing for herself. She's doing what she's supposed to be doing according to everybody else. And it's everybody else sort of reacting to her strangeness and brusqueness and insanity and trying to be helpful at the same time. It's pretty funny here and there at times. I laughed aloud a couple times. The drama works. I think if you're in a certain age or circumstance, it may speak to you as it sort of did to me in some lard. No, it wasn't about cooking at all, in some large ways. And nicely shot, too. So, very interesting cast. A lot more people than are advertised in this film. A lot of people have very tiny roles. Like you see Megan Mullally, and you see Lawrence Fishburne, and you see Steve Zahn, and there's just a ton of people who have very tiny little moments in the film. But at the core, it's really Cate Blanchett and Billy Crudup, who's her husband, Kristen Wiig, who's the neighbor, and the daughter of the family there. And it was interesting. It starts off as one of those things where the daughter of the family is like, hey, I really want to go to Antarctica for vacation. And the parents are like, well, okay. And I'm like, oh, it's one of those movies where I can't relate to anybody. People for whom going to Antarctica is yeah, our weekend's free. Let's hit that. But as it went on, I think the larger truths were spoken, and it became very interesting to me and compelling. And Blanchett's very good. Like, I have a thing about what I call Faux-American accents, or Faux-Americans, British people playing American, because I can usually spot it in the accent, and it always bothers me. And there was a little of that here, but she was just so good as this multifaceted person that it didn't bother me at all. Lawrence Fishburne was really good too. I mean, not that he isn't always, but so often we just see him in bit parts in like the John Wick movies or The Matrix or whatever. And he was like a real guy in this movie. He was a real person. It didn't really, you almost forgot you were looking at Lawrence Fishburne because you were just looking at this dude. So I guess I don't have a tremendous amount to say about this. It was just really well done, and it was a really nice surprise on a lazy Sunday afternoon that I watched yesterday. This is Anna Perina Dog Chow. I'm not sure if they're related or not. It's an art house film. So this is one that may show up in some multiplexes, may show up in some art houses. I don't think it's playing currently in Keene. This is one that I could see here where we record. This is one I could see playing at the Colonial or at the Key Cinemas, which means nothing to any of you who live outside of town. But I'm just saying, when I say art house film, that means generally a little bit quirkier, a little bit more intelligent, and also, sadly, a little bit harder to see. So if you have a multiplex, I saw this at an AMC in Pennsylvania that had 16 screens, so they can take a gamble on things like this. And things like a Bollywood movie about a mission to Mars. And I'm like, is there dancing in that? There has to be dancing in that, right? It's about the scientific team who put, like a Mars rover from India up on Mars, but there has to be dancing and motorcycle chases, right? Because it's a Bollywood movie. I've never seen one without him. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with Cate Blanchett. That's what I saw in the theater this weekend. And I will now move on to that which you can see on the home video streaming service, platform, device, or medical implant of your choice. First up is a film that I barely remember. So let's take a shot at this, shall we? This is a film that is probably based on a book about two young urbanites who meet cute in the city of all of our dreams and try to figure out whether love is mathematical, chemical, or magical in a film entitled The Sun Is Also a Star. So it's shot like a pharmaceutical commercial. Saw this in the theater, haven't seen it since. Legitimately forgot this movie existed until I saw it on my list for today. Legitimately forgot about almost everything about it until I just watched the trailer. So we were experiencing that moment together. So you have a young woman whose family is on the cusp of being deported for their visa has run out and they need to go back to where they came from. And you have a young man who is trying to struggle to be in a corporate world, but he wants to be a poet, and he's beautiful and an underwear model. Not, but he might as well be. And he sings with a yangy voice, and he's got the tousled hair. Two impossibly beautiful people meet in the greatest city in the world, and do they find love? You figure it out. So, not that I have anything wrong with good-looking people. It's always pleasant to look at somebody who's good-looking. So you have these two people. She is very by the book. She's very scientific. She's very learned and studied. And he is very free and easy and doesn't want to go in the family business and wants to strike out on his own. And they meet by happenstance, and he tries to convince her that he can make her fall in love with him, and she says it's impossible, love's not a real thing, it's not scientific, blah, blah, blah. And so the whole film is this push and pull with them. I'm going to give something away. Falling in love and having a glorious day in the greatest city in the world. They'll keep telling you, New York City. And it's pleasant. It's fine. It's pleasant. If you want to watch a romantic movie, it certainly is. I just found it a little, I hate to say by the numbers because they all are. All the romantic films are the same. Lee said years ago, it's, two people meet, one of them does something stupid, they go apart, and then they get back together at the end. I'm not going to say that's exactly what happens in this one, but it's pretty damn close to what happens in this one. So both of the leads are likable. They're both, fine in the performances they give. It is sort of a tale of not judging somebody by what they look like to a degree, because each one looking at the other makes all these assumptions that are not really true. I don't know. It's not really the kind of movie for me. It was fine when I saw it in the theater. I can see where people would like it a lot if you're into that sort of thing. It's just sort of it's not really my bag, man. You know what I mean? So Sun Is Also a Star is out there now. Speaking of my bag, notice I didn't use the word sack. We are on Facebook Live right now. Probably nobody's watching, but we're on Facebook Live right now, and we put this show on Facebook. So we have a Facebook page. You need a Facebook page to do that. So we're going to keep doing this as long as they'll allow us to and not slap us down and or claim copyright on 6 seconds of a piece of music in the middle of a trailer that is owned by a company. And we put the shows on live as we do them. So if I swear accidentally or if there's really inappropriate content in a trailer, you'll see it here and nowhere else. And it will remain on Facebook afterwards. So if you're watching this on Facebook and it's not Monday, August 19th, then that's what you're doing. Facebook is also where I post updates about the show. I post additional content, additional reviews, links to if somebody is having a really good sale. If Kino's having a sale, I'll post it on Facebook or all kinds of stuff like that. It's just a place to go. And if you have questions or interests or anything about that, that's a way you can get in contact with us. And us, by us, I mean me. How are you? So Facebook is there. Now, we will move on to another film that many people liked in the theater, and I saw in the theater, and I do remember. And it is a film that is basically the basic idea. The easiest way to describe this film is, what if you took the Superman story and instead of a hero, he turned out to be a villain? And that's what you got. You have Elizabeth Banks, who finds a meteor coming down from the sky in their farm country, and she finds a little baby in there, she and her husband, and they raise that baby up to be a really disturbingly troubled youth in a little ditty called Brightburn. This was one that a lot of people were very excited about in the theater. It's James Gunn related. He didn't direct it, but I think he produced it and his brother wrote it. James Gunn, who did the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and Slither and some other things. And so it's basically like an evil Superman or an evil Superboy. He's a kid. He's an adolescent in this film. And people were excited. Some people really liked it. I didn't really care for it. So yeah, it's a dark Superman. It follows the same basic idea. And you see this kid when he sort of hits adolescence or puberty, he starts, in a parallel to the changes that go through a person's body at that age, he starts developing these powers and starts getting really dark and develops a fixation on a girl. So what would normally be a crush on a girl in class becomes this mega creepy supervillainy stalking of the girl in class. And I have a problem with evil kids, the whole evil kid genre. They never come off as evil to me. They just come off as little twerps who are not good actors. So the evil kid thing didn't really interest me. The storyline, I'm just like, yeah, Superman I like. Evil Superman, don't really care so much. And what I remember most about this and was most impressive to me was that there's violence in this film that I did not see coming, and I did not expect the degree of gore and explicitness that we get in the violence in this movie. There is some hard R gore in this film that was shocking, and people in the audience squealed, because up to that point in the movie, you're not led to believe it's going to be that kind of film. And then it happens, and it just blows you away. You're just like, wow, I'm seeing this in a semi-mainstream release in a theater right now. This is pretty crazy. So for me, I'm not a gore hound. I can't say a movie is good because of that, but for my own taste, those were the best parts of this movie. The rest I just found kind of tedious and kind of dull, honestly. I didn't find the kid menacing. I thought it was annoying, and when he does, the pop-up jump scare stuff, I just find that really kind of lame at this point. So everybody in it was fine. Elizabeth Banks is uniformly always good, I think, and otherwise, it just wasn't that interesting to me. Now, again, there's a lot of people who really like this. They tend to be younger than I am, so Brightburn might be your cup of tea. Rent, a Superman movie. Rent. Do people rent anymore? Watch a Superman movie and then double it with Brightburn. That might be kind of interesting. Get the two origins. Or you could watch Man of Steel and Brightburn and note which one has a less shaky camera and bad editing to it. I don't know. So that's Brightburn. That is out now. We now move to the Arrow Video Corner, which I don't think we probably have a graphic for anymore. We have to retool all of our graphics because we have a new system that runs the show, and the Arrow Video graphic that Tom had done was done under the old system, and it won't work anymore. So trust us that it's the Arrow Video Corner, okay? If you don't know, Arrow Video is a UK-based company which also has a US branch, and they release classic films, not so classic films, older films for the most part on Blu-ray. They do amazing remasterings. They do new extras. They're to me, I always say Arrow is my Criterion. Criterion is great. They put out great movies, some of the greatest movies of all time, but Arrow is more my kind of stuff. So they initially just released stuff in the UK. Now they release things in the US and the UK. Sometimes you get exclusives to the UK because they don't have the rights here, but otherwise it's mostly the same release slate on both sides of the ocean. And they do things like foreign films and old trashy movies and old super classics, and they have the offshoot called Arrow Academy, which is for the more refined art house films or studio classics. And this is an Arrow Video release we're about to talk about right now. This is a film from William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist and great classics like The Exorcist and Deal of the Century. The Exorcist and Deal of the Century and Sorcerer and The French Connection and things like that. This was a film he did with Al Pacino in 1980 about a series of murders that were going on in the gay subculture, the gay leather community in 1980. And the film is entitled Cruising. This is a film that was really controversial in its time. It was really controversial in its time. It was really controversial when it was being made. It was seen by the gay community as sort of an attack on them because it was perceived when they were shooting it that the film was depicting, this culture as, perverse and weird and seamy and unhealthy and all this other stuff. These are people, of course, hadn't actually seen the movie, and they actively tried to disrupt production of the film. There are large crowds that would gather outside shooting locations or in the same building and just make tons of noise to try to disrupt it. And I found out in the extras that there's a lot of looping, replacement of dialogue, dubbing, if you will, in this film. And it's because there was so much noise going on when they shot it, they couldn't use the original audio. And at times that looping, I think, gives it this weird otherworldly feeling and that actually maybe helps the movie in a way. And it was controversial when it came out for the same reason. Basically, again, the story is that Pacino is a undercover cop. Forgive me, I can't recall if it's New York or San Francisco, but he goes undercover because a series of murders are going on in this community, and the police obviously want to stop it. And so he goes into these bars as this like leather guy. He's straight, but he's having to pretend to be gay, which is, you know, a hard time for him to begin with. You see Karen Allen as his, the year before Raiders of the Lost Ark came out, Karen Allen as his girlfriend, and he can't tell her what he's doing because it's the secret mission, so to speak, and it sort of disrupts their relationship. And it's just fascinating. Pacino is outstanding in this film. It's fascinating to see him deal with these things that he's not comfortable with, but he has to for his mission, if you will. It is incredibly creepy, not for the content of who the people are, but just the way it's shot. It's Friedkin. Friedkin made The Exorcist. He knows how to make a scary movie. And he brings that feeling to this film that's really a crime thriller. It's not a horror movie per se, but it feels like a horror movie. And because of the killings that occur in it, which are traumatic and horrifying, it feels almost like a slasher movie to a degree. So I've always felt that in the music, the score, the rock score, the soundtrack, if you will, to Cruising is really good. And you hear a little bit of that in the trailer. It's kind of punk, kind of a punk soundtrack. The score itself is like a, you know, cinematic or orchestral score at times, and that's really creepy. And the way that works with the scenes make it very unsettling. And it's a movie I've always liked. It's a movie I'd read about for years as being controversial, and I finally was able to see it like on cable or something. And I remember really thinking it was quite good. And I'd forgotten until I watched it again how ambiguous this film is about who the killer is. I totally forgot that until I watched it again, and it really throws you. They do some things I won't explain here. Friedkin talks about it in one of the extras. There's 2 archival featurettes that they call them, which I think were done for an early 2000s DVD release when this first hit DVD, where you get Friedkin and Jerry Weintraub and some other people involved with the production of the movie talking about it. And he pulls back the curtain and tells you what he did with this movie and how it works on you and why, and it was really, really interesting. And it's something I didn't realize until I watched it again, and I'm like, hey, yeah, that's really unusual, and that really throws you and keeps you off balance. It is not a terribly explicit film if you're worried about, you know, the man-on-man action in the movie. It's not terribly explicit. It's what a master filmmaker does, is he makes you think you're seeing something you're not seeing. And he talks about that in terms of the violence. In Psycho, you never see the knife. I think there's a frame maybe where you see the knife sort of penetrate somebody's body. But in this film, it's all done through editing and subliminals and implication. So it's not a terribly graphic movie. It's just that the content is so heavy and edgy for a lot of people that there's no way it's ever not going to be R-rated, you know? This film has seen a few different video releases. It came out in the old days on tape, and it was, you know, 4:3, pan and scan, looked pretty washed out and gross. It was released on DVD in a very controversial amongst fans release because Friedkin, like George Lucas, and as we continue to see Francis Ford Coppola, Friedkin doesn't necessarily feel like his movies are ever finished. So he'll put something out again and tweak it a little. So the previous DVD release of Cruising had tons of sequences where it was tinted blue. It was a very blue leaning of the color grading, which is never how it had looked before. But he said that's how he wanted it. And he added there's a moment where Al Pacino is given or takes like a popper or something in a nightclub, and it gets all blurry and hazy, which was never part of the film before. The DVD had that. So I was really curious with this Arrow release what it would look like, because the Arrow press release touts that this film is restored from the original camera negative to Friedkin specifications, and I'm happy to say it doesn't have that blue stuff going on. Now, if you want to know what that blue stuff looked like, either you look at it online or on the Blu-ray in these archival featurettes, they have clips from the movie from that transfer, and you can see the contrast. It's very blue, these nightclub scenes and nighttime scenes, and you do see that hazy effect that he had put in for that release. Happy to say the haze and the blue are not in this. This is how I presume the film looked in theaters. I will say that a friend of mine who's a major fan of Cruising said that Friedkin did tweak a couple of things in the movie. I didn't look up to see what they were. I didn't notice anything any different, but then again, I haven't seen this movie in a decade or two, and I don't really know it as explicitly as my friend does. So be warned or be aware that if maybe don't throw every other copy of Cruising you have in the garbage until you've bought and watched the Arrow version. throw them after. If you feel like the Arrow version is the final version, then throw them away just in case. I have a couple movies like that where something is tweaked and it's like, I want the new one for the quality, but I'm keeping the old one because it's got what I always saw in it. Anyway, Cruising is really, really good. I think very unsettling. It's a great snapshot of a subculture that existed at a place in time that was back in, again, can't remember if it was New York or San Francisco. Pretty sure it was New York. And shot on actual locations with a lot of actual people who participated in that era and that time. So it's pretty darn authentic from what I've read. As far as extras go, Arrow usually loads these up. Sometimes there's so much in the way of Arrow extras, you wonder if you'll ever get through them all. Here it's much more manageable. You have 2 audio commentaries. You have one with William Friedkin, which I believe is a carryover from the previous release, and then one with William Friedkin and critic Mark Kermode, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I haven't listened to either of those. And then you have 2 archival featurettes about the making of Cruising, and they're each about 20 minutes or so. So you get a good amount of time. I felt very satisfied with how long the featurettes were, and they gave me a lot of information that I didn't know about the film. Made me want to go back and watch the film because it pointed out some of those little tricks that he had done in making the film more effective. So that is out on Blu-ray from Arrow now already. You go out today, I think, and get it. And if it's not out today, it's out tomorrow. Today being subjective as to whenever you watch me saying this. So I also want to mention, before I say, there's one more thing I want to talk about and fill up, wow, probably not that much time. We have an email address. Still, yes, we do. It's movies@CheshireTV.org. It is yet another way to send us messages and ask questions or give us tips, points, comments, brownie recipes. Oh, I like brownies. That's there for you. So one more movie that I didn't think I was going to talk about, but I will. So it's another entry in what I did on my summer vacation, my weekend. As you may know, I spend my weekends, oh wait, we have a trailer. So I spend my weekends at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Laheyton, Pennsylvania, about an hour north of Philly-ish, 2.5 hours south of New York City. And we do themed weekends every weekend. It's double features that are similar or the same film series or whatever. And this last weekend, we are going to show the trailer. This last weekend, it was the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock concert, if you hadn't heard. And to commemorate that, we ran the director's cut of the movie on our big screen. And we had live bands all day, and it was really pretty cool. So here is the original trailer, 1970, for the film entitled Woodstock. Very nice. Very nice. Transitions, gotta love them. So I had seen the film Woodstock, I think the last time I saw it. Okay, this was a realization that I don't like. The last time I saw this movie, I believe, was when it was the 20th anniversary of Woodstock, and MTV ran it, and they made a big deal about it. And going in and out of commercial breaks, they would play little clips of bands or songs that were never used in the film, and they interviewed people who were there, and they interviewed people from the bands who were there. And it was this big event on MTV. That was for the 20th anniversary. Okay. Despite what any calculator will tell you, it was not 30 years ago that I last watched Woodstock, because I'm not old enough to have watched anything 30 years ago, okay? So yeah, that math didn't quite work out right. So now we're at the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, and so we ran the movie on the big screen on film. We always do everything on film, but it was the director's cut, which I'd never seen. And the director's cut is apparently about an hour longer than the original film. Original film wasn't short. Director's cut was about 4 hours long, and never felt it to me. I was never bored. This is, and what's interesting, I meant to look it up before I sat down to do this. I don't know what the differences are between the director's cut and the previous cut of Woodstock. Obviously, it's an hour more content. It didn't feature any artists that I don't remember being in the original film. Like famously or infamously, people like Creedence Clearwater Revival were at Woodstock, but they didn't want their performances used in the film because they thought it wasn't any good. And I've had a bootleg, an audio bootleg, since I was in high school of the Creedence Woodstock set, and you listen to it, and it's fine. It's fine. You're Creedence in 1969. You're okay. There's not a problem with this. And other bands that were smaller bands, people forget, I think the general public, how many artists were at Woodstock. Because you see the movie and you see the album, you for some reason think that was it. But it was 3 days from early in the morning until late at night that people played. And if you go to the Woodstock Museum, it's the museum at Bethel Woods, it was called, or it's the Bethel Woods Center for Arts and Culture in Bethel, not Vermont, Bethel, New York, which is amazing. Literally, you can spend all day there. They have this timeline of who played when and quotes for every band and what their set list was, a copy of whatever their album at the time was, and it really blows you away to see the volume of music that was there, the variety of music that was there, and then the number of musicians and bands that played at that, not just what's limited to the movie. So watching the movie, I didn't notice there maybe somebody had an extra song. It's possible that they added an extra song for certain groups, but it didn't seem like it. I think what it did was add a whole lot more documentary footage of the people who attended, and the little microcosms of society that were there, you know, the medical tent and the food tent and the hog farm people and the spiritual people and the yoga people and all that other stuff, the townspeople interviews, all of which is fascinating. You think Woodstock, and the easiest thing to say is, oh yeah, it was that concert. It was a lot more than a concert. It was emblematic of the times. It was people coming together, 800,000, 500,000. It was a lot of people there, and not violence. Everybody got along, you know, peace, love, and a whole lot of something going around there, and it worked out real well. Didn't work out well for the cleanup crew, but it worked out well for everybody else. And it's interesting to see the townspeople and all of the concert goers interacting, and all the townspeople saying how nice everybody was and how friendly everybody was. A friend of my parents who I stayed with a little while ago was an original attendee at Woodstock, and he told me about he and his friends going there, and they were in a van, kind of a beat up old van, and they only made it so far until there was nowhere else to go because the roads and the traffic was just locked up and there was nowhere to park. So they just pulled a van onto somebody's lawn and left it there. And they said, well, if it's there when we get back, we'll pick it up, and if it's not, we'll find another way home. It's really all about getting to this show. And when they got back, it turned they were getting in to leave, and the owners came out to see who had parked on their lawn for the last several days, and they invited them in for dinner, and that's pretty sweet. I don't know that you would get that now. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But anyway, the Woodstock movie is fascinating because it's got the music, it's got amazing music, it's got some of the icons of 60s rock, and it's got some lesser known people to me or to a lot of people, and it's just fascinating. It's got this, it was shot in 16, so it was shot square, and it's a widescreen film, so a lot of the time you're seeing two images at once, maybe you're seeing even more than two images at once, and it's just cool to see the multiple angles and how they utilize that, where you can be watching the audience and the performer at the same time. Pretty well shot. I'm pretty sure that Martin Scorsese may have been one of the cameramen there. So I know some sort of famous people were involved, enlisted to carry the God knows how many cameras there were around to cover that thing. So it's just a fascinating film. It's a fascinating time capsule of August 1969. Even though it's all, a muddy hill in New York State, a lot of what was going on in the world is brought into that, politics and philosophy and attitudes and things like that. It's not, somebody nowadays dressing up like a hippie and spouting platitudes. It's the people who were living it back then on film, all of whom are grandparents' age now. I worked the cash register at the drive-in, and there was a lot of folks there who were the Woodstock generation who were super happy to be there, super cool folks, wonderful to talk to. And one guy had a Woodstock 94 shirt on, and he said to me, oh yeah, I was at all of them. And I'm like, pardon? He's like, oh yeah, I went to all the Woodstocks. Every time they did a Woodstock, he went, and he was at the original, obviously. And he said, it was great, it was peace and love, but it was a mess. And I thought that was pretty funny, because when you watch the film, 500,000 people generate a lot of garbage, and is organized that Woodstock Festival tried to be when, double the attendance shows up and keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming. It's hard to manage that. So you see scenes at the end where it's just this muddy hillside with mattresses and clothes and garbage everywhere. Again, I haven't done the research, but I would love to know how long it took them to clean all that up, because it must have been a ridiculous amount of time. And how long it took for grass to come back to that hillside too, as a matter of fact. You go to the Bethel Woods Center now, and it's a beautiful grassy hillside. It's mostly still open from how it was then. They have a concert venue at the top of the hill now, and they have the big museum there, and it's a function hall, and it's seriously worth going to. Even if you're not a fan of the Woodstock event, it's this immersive trip back in time to 1969 and this event, and a lot of really cool artifacts and things like that. But the hillside is still the hillside, and there's a little viewing area you can go, and you can sort of be near where the original stage was and look up at that hill that the artist saw 50 years ago and try to imagine. There are shots in the movie, what always really sold it for me was there's a shot of the crowd and all you see is people and they keep pulling back and it's just people. And a helicopter flies over and it's people for as far as you can see, and it's just crazy. It's crazy that they were able to function with that many people and the rain that came back then, and it's amazing that so many people lived to tell the tale for a number of reasons. So anyway, we're talking about the movie Woodstock, though. So the movie has fantastic performances, really well recorded. The version we saw was on film, of course. I know you can get this on Blu-ray, and very well recorded audio and video. So to see, you know, Joe Cocker and Hendrix and The Who and Janis Joplin and so many people in their prime is fantastic. A shame that there isn't more video or film in the movie of all the other acts, but honestly, if you wanted a really good representation, the movie would be 3 days long. Now, I know Rhino Records, who's been leaders in the reissue game since the 80s, they're putting out or have put out a massive Woodstock 50th anniversary set, and it's something like 30 CDs. I think it's all the music. It might just be everything that was recorded at the time finally coming out in one place, and it might be a pretty extended version of the movie too. I'm not 100% in that, but if you look it up, Woodstock 50th anniversary Rhino Records, you'll find that. That's looked really interesting. Now, at the drive-in this weekend, we do camping. People can buy an overnight pass and they can stay overnight. So if you're coming from a long distance away, you can pay $10 extra and not have to go home at the end of the night. It's safer. I always say it's safer than a late night drive home and cheaper than a room. And we had people camping out for Woodstock. So we had people with, you know, tie-dye and their old VW bugs and all kinds of like 60s vibe to it. And it felt like a concert. It was really, really cool. And there was a local, it might have been the Philly College radio station, was replaying the entire 3 days of Woodstock in real time as it originally happened on the radio. So we had people during the day on the lot listening to what would have been playing at Woodstock at that point 50 years ago, and that was really, really cool. It was a great vibe. Everybody was really, really nice, had a really good time, applauded at the end of some of the acts. We're sitting outside watching a concert movie that takes place outside, so it was pretty transcendent, shall we say. So that's just my take on the whole Woodstock thing. Woodstock's been in the news a lot lately because it's the 50th anniversary. I would highly recommend watching the movie if you're curious. It's not short, but it's very interesting, and it's the kind of thing that people have tried to replicate it. There was a Woodstock 94, there was a Woodstock, was it 97 or 99? 99 probably. And at least one of those had infamously disruptive actions going on at it. It's hard to get that many people in one place, and then when you throw substances into the mix to kind of all get along and be cool. And they did it in '69. I'd like to think it could be done again someday, but you know, these mega festivals, they don't always turn out so good now. So as the Fire Festival documentary will tell you. So that's all I have to talk about. I may yip-yap a little bit more, but not by much. Next week, we have 2 films on the docket. We have Angel Has Fallen, which is the 3rd in the series of Has Fallen movies. And it's not about Life Alert, unfortunately. If Gerard Butler keeps making these, it will be Gerard Has Fallen and Can't Get Up. Sorry. So we have Gerard Butler as a Secret Service guy. Olympus Has Fallen was the first movie where terrorists take over the White House. And then you had London Has Fallen, where the president is cornered by terrorists or kidnapped or whatever in London, and Butler has to save them. Now we have Angel Has Fallen, where Morgan Freeman is the president and gets attacked by bad guys or terrorists, and Gerard Butler has to protect him or take out the bad guys or who knows what. But it's Gerard Butler being the action man again. The other film I have on the list is a film called Ready or Not, which is one of those movies where I wish the trailer was at least half the length it currently is, because it really gives away too much. It's a woman who's about to be married, and she goes to the palatial family estate of her soon-to-be husband and finds out they play this game every year, and it turns out to be basically the most dangerous game. So she and maybe somebody else have to, you know, do what they can to survive the night, and maybe if she survives, she'll be allowed to marry him and not just be buried where the family plot is. On video, we have Godzilla King of the Monsters, which was the most recent new American Godzilla flick. I'm not too hot on the American Godzilla movies historically, so we'll talk about that. And then we have Rocket Man, which is not the William Shatner story. It is the film that is the biopic, the musical biopic of Elton John that came out not too long ago. And then that's probably, we'll see. We'll see what else I have to talk about because there's no Arrow next week, and I'm going to have a really busy weekend. Maybe I'll talk about my weekend. Next weekend, I'm going back to the Mahoning. We do our annual Camp Blood event, which is done by Exhumed Films, and we sort of just host it. And it's usually 2 nights of 80s camping-themed slasher movies. So you think Friday the 13th or The Burning or things like that. And we do that, and there's camping-themed games, and some people from Exhumed dress up as camp counselors. Dan from Exhumed usually dresses up like Morty from, pretty accurately, like Morty from Meatballs, and hosts these games. It's a heck of a lot of fun. People camp out all weekend. It's usually one of our biggest events of the year. This is looking to be maybe the biggest one of these we've ever done. And it's Friday the 13th 3 and Prom Night, which isn't camping themed. We're sort of branching into, or they're branching into slasher films in general. And then Jill Sholin, who's been in a lot of movies in the 80s. I inaccurately said last week and was corrected, thank you, that she was in Jason Goes to Hell. She's not. We're showing Jason Goes to Hell as to keep the Friday the 13th theme and to finish off running the original set of those movies, or I guess there's one more with Jason X. But Jill Sholin was in things like Cutting Class and the Robert Englund Phantom of the Opera, which I like a lot, and The Stepfather. She's going to be there in person signing things and talking to folks, and we're showing a bunch of her movies on the second night, and it's just going to be really cool and amazing. So if I get to watch any of those, maybe I'll supplement my reviews with reviews of those movies because those are all out on video and easy to see. Until then, that's really kind of all I got. So I'm going to let you get back to your busy lives. I'm going to get back to my incredibly busy life, and I will see you at the movies. Bye.